Welcome everybody to our first official episode of the Sash and Ash Show, where we have real talk with raw people around relevant matters. Today we're going to be discussing a topic that most of us have experienced in one way or another, but that there's a lot of misunderstanding around, and that is toxic relationships.
Hey. Okay, so joining us today are two powerful, beautiful men who have gone through their own as Sash dips in and out. She's grasping on the deal like here, trying to come back to us. Where's the grounding on Sash? I think you forgot to tell God to ground her.
And raw, okay.
So, a little bit of technical difficulties here, so bear with us. If she comes in and out, no, she is always here. Like a star, you may not always see her, but she is here. So, also joining us today are two incredibly beautiful men who have been through their own journeys, destructive paths, and also beauty in it all, right? So, Eric, Sean, and Willie Dyer, welcome to the Sash and Ash Show. Thank you so much for being here and launching with us. This is like the best way to go in.
Most definitely. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so do you guys want to take a moment just to introduce yourselves?
Was that?
So what you say? I couldn't hear you.
Sure. Do you guys want to just take a little bit of moment just to introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Let Eric go first.
Yeah, my name is Eric Sean. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm also a mindset coach. My goal is to empower and motivate as many people on this planet as possible. I am also a personal trainer, and I have a little bit of experience around crazy relationships, toxic relationships, as you call it. So I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Willie, would you like to go?
Yeah. My name is William Dyer. Personally, I'm just a young man that's finally stumbling across what he's speaking on. You know, I'm realizing that your mind, your body, it works together. And if you step aside and focus, you can use it to create whatever life you want. So I'm in the beginning stages. I'm just excited about showing the world that, hey, they're not just talking. You can really put this stuff to work and you can live the life that you want.
Well said. Yes, such a beautiful journey to be on, and very glad that you are stepping into that and really stepping into your truth and recognizing that there is more to life. And I think it's such a beautiful journey to be on.
And you totally down yourself. You're a powerhouse, and you discovered. So story up.
No.
So here's the thing. It's no secret that Ashley and I have both been through one toxic, abusive relationship after the next. And for a very long time, we saw ourselves as victims. We took no responsibility, and it was so easy to make the other person the bad guy and all of that, as we all do, men and women alike. However, women, we kind of have more of a tendency to make ourselves the victims and to make the man the bad guy. And we get stuck and caught up in that victim story. But what we don't realize is that we're all human. We're all just trying to figure it out. So,
yeah, I did want to just add that too, because I know as much as I blamed my partner for certain things that happened, I know I was the one always blaming myself and making myself wrong, thinking that if I hadn't have done this, he wouldn't have done that, you know, and I was always making it like he was, you know, excusing the behaviors that he chose to do. And I didn't always necessarily own what I did because I didn't have the awareness to fully recognize that, but I was more so always making myself wrong. And I find a lot of the time, especially as women, we do tend to, you know, try to always pick up the pieces and think that, you know, we just got to put all the puzzle together and it'll be fine if we just get our shit together, right? And so I do want to say that there are probably a lot of people that don't always blame the other side, and they're always blaming themselves. So I just wanted to kind of add that side of the coin.
And that's just it. It's a blame game, right? It's you're the bad guy or I'm the bad guy. And that's not the reality of the situation. We don't usually stop to look at the fact that in most cases, because there are circumstances where, you know, there are some people who are just naturally manipulative and aren't just very good people. But in most cases, it takes two to tango. So let's invite you guys into the conversation. So we're going to start off. We'll just ask you one question at a time. So we'll start with Eric. You've done a lot of personal development and you have a very, very good understanding of your past patterns. And so we want to ask you, can you share with us a little bit about what your past patterns in relationships have been and how you behaved yourself, owning responsibility from the awareness that you have now in those relationships?
Yeah, but first I want to say, Willie, man, if I had that Southern drawl, if I had that voice, I would have been trouble.
I know that's right, man.
I love it.
Oh yeah,
I'm
trying to put it to use, man. Trying to put it to use, man. For real.
Yeah.
Sure you did.
Yeah, for good.
For good,
you know,
yeah.
for me, I've done a lot of inventory taking over the years, and there definitely was a pattern for me, and I think that it's the same pattern for a lot of people. I think that well, let me just talk about me. For me, it started off based off of childhood issues. You know, I always say that most of the time we're adults basically living in, you know, we're children living in adult bodies because we never really get over all the traumatic stuff that happens when we're a child, or the way we perceive it. Our perception never changes. You know, my mom had her own issues when she was a teenager. She had me. I always took that as she put me up for adoption. And so in my mind, if my mom gave up on me, then I had no value. I was useless. And based on that, every relationship that I went into, I realized and thought that sooner or later the woman was going to leave. So now if she was going to leave, then there was no reason for me to be vulnerable. And if she was going to leave, then why base everything on her? It made more sense to have a couple backup plans, you know? So my pattern was always that I was a womanizer. I manipulated women. I always generally was in relationships with 2 or 3 women at the same time, because that's where I got my value from.
Mm.
You know, and plus growing up, I was always taught that if you were a man, you were basically your manhood was based on how many women you had.
Yeah.
You know, I was taught how to relationship skills from people who just came out of the penitentiary most of the time. You know, and so that was the basic philosophy. It was you were a man if you were a player, and that basically fit right into basically my perception of things from my mom. You know, so the information that I gained along the years kind of allowed me to reinforce and be okay with what I did. You know, so I didn't really have to face myself. I didn't really have to realize how the people that I was hurting, because that was just what men did. You know, but a lot of my patterns were the exact same. I didn't feel like I had any value, so my value came from the amount of women that I could be in a relationship and manipulate. And it went on for many, many years until I had to kind of take responsibility for who I was and actually create value and see my own value, because otherwise it never would have stopped. But I definitely had a pattern, and my pattern was that I relied on my value from women, from other people. And regardless of how many women I had, it never increased my value. And because I felt like that they were going to leave, I ended up pushing them away. You know, I never really gave the relationship a chance because I was dishonest, and there was no vulnerability. There was no true sharing of any emotions. And so it was just like a vicious cycle.
You made a lot of really good points there, and I'm really glad that you were able to come into the awareness of those patterns, because a lot of times people go through their whole life never recognizing that. And I know for myself, I resonate with that in terms of how I found my value in having somebody love me. I needed that external validation because 1, I was afraid to be alone, and 2, I had no sense of self-worth. So I needed to feel like somebody else wanted me. And then if you pair that with, the fear of being left and that fear of abandonment. You want that love, but then it's like you're afraid to get attached to that love because you feel like they're going to leave anyway. So it just those cycles of self-destruction, which I feel like a lot of people, that's our story, because all human beings have the same fear of not being good enough and not being loved. And we don't often tend to look at how those fears and those insecurities drive us in relationships. So it's really, really powerful. And Willie, you, just to kind of go over to you for a second, you mentioned to us also that for quite some time, you were also a bit of a womanizer. So can you share with us what exactly you mean by that?
Yeah, like me, I was a womanizer, not even really trying to be necessarily. Me, I didn't love myself, and I was kind of looking for love in all the areas. But I found love in making somebody fall in love with me. Like for that little bit of time, like I liked myself because seeing them fall in love with me made me be like, oh well, shit, I am all right. But then eventually the new wear off of it, and I'm right back in stage one because it was artificial love. You know what I mean? It wasn't my love. It was somebody else giving me something. And if you can't love yourself, you ain't gonna get far in life. So I kept searching for that. And kind of like you were saying, Ash, was I had great women in my life and I wasn't mistreating them. Is the problem. My mistreatment for real came from they had a task that wasn't possible. They were trying to love me, and I wasn't even to a position to accept the love because I didn't love myself. So no matter how hard they tried and no matter how hard they swept stuff to the side and tried to make it right to see the good in me, it didn't matter, and they still end up getting hurt in the long run. You know what I mean? So that's where my shit came from, because and it's good women, they cared about me, and they're like, shit, they tried and they know I was a good person. I was just so lost as a man that I couldn't give them what they were looking for. And I feel like a lot of women, kind of like yourself, y'all hold yourself accountable for our actions. You know what I mean? So I've left some good women that were scorned because of nothing they done and nothing that they could have done. But in their previous relationship, they're holding on to that thinking it was their fault, or he cheated because I wasn't pretty enough, or he cheated because I didn't do this enough. But really, it was my own issues that caused it. So you took part of my problem to your next relationship, or you see what I mean? And it creates that same relationship because you brought that baggage in each relationship you go on down the road. So my advice for women would be, hey, don't hold yourself accountable for the mistakes men make, because a lot of us are so lost as men, we have no direction. You're looking for something and you're trying to hold your part to the puzzle when we don't even have our part. You know what I mean? So like it took me a long time to realize this. I went through a marriage, went all through all kind of stuff, and finally realized, like, man, each woman I get with, I'm still unhappy. So finally, I'm a little slow. So finally, I'm like, okay, maybe I might be the problem. You know what I mean? Maybe it might be me. So I started looking, and as I did, that's why I'm on this journey of just trying to learn myself, man, and just grow, because all the problems in the world, if you don't start with the ones in your household or the ones inside your head, you'll never get to the other ones. And a lot of them can be, control your controllables. Like if you can't control it, analyze it and move along, So yeah, like I got a little bit off, but for me, it was stuff like that, man. I was not trying to. And the problem was I really loved that person and I didn't want to hurt them. So that pushed me, like it put me in this weird state of mind because I'm hurting people, not trying to hurt them, but I can't stop the cycle. And, for so long, it'd be good. And I end up getting caught cheating. And, I lie, move on along. You know what I mean? The same cycle over and over. So it really just took me a long time. The key for me was finally getting to the point to where I believed in myself enough to believe that I deserved the love. You know what I mean? To love myself. So,
Yeah, you definitely touched on a lot of really valid points and very important key things for people to really hear. And I love that you kind of brought up, you just kind of take that baggage to the next relationship, and that's a lot of the time what we end up doing is, we move on to the next person and get rid of that relationship and think it's going to be different going somewhere else. But when we aren't actually looking at ourselves or at what what the relationship entailed, we can't actually move forward into anything better, because you got that suitcase of everything you just experienced and you're bringing that through, and now you're seeing other people through the lens of all the things you just prior experienced, and have now thrown that onto them. And now it's not just that you and that person in the relationship, it's you and all those people before you that you never actually took the time to heal from. And I think that's important for people to recognize is, you know, we have to, when we go into something new, you have to go in like you're walking into a white room and newly create, because otherwise there's just plasters of everything all over. And I find, you know, I had a really interesting experience over the winter, is that somebody that I was, you know, talking to and engaging with, they literally reminded me of 3 of my exes, like the sound of the voice, the quality, like it was blowing my head off because I didn't know how to actually deal with that. And it was funny because I was actually, just prior to that, I was learning a lot about the concept of bonding, and that's a whole nother conversation to have. But basically,
like each person that we interact with, especially sexually, we have this energetic exchange. And I think that we're so conditioned to feel like sex is just such a natural part of our culture that we grow up, we sleep around, we have sex with different people throughout our lives. We don't realize that we're taking on those energies of different people as we go on. And until we can actually do a cleanse to get rid of all that, we're going to continue to carry that energy forward.
And not only that, but I know for a woman who is very attracted to alpha men, you know, when you have an encounter with an alpha, and for example, if your heart gets broken and that relationship comes to an end, you now will never be able to actually connect with somebody on a deep level unless they equally or outdo the bondage that you had with that other person. So unless they are as equal of an alpha or higher, and like the connection, you cannot actually fully connect to that person, because you're always going to be comparing it to that past alpha, and the similarity is not enough.
And that's on a biological level too, so it's crazy. But yeah, so just a side note, I realized that it's when we're moving around that we start to go invisible. So
Yeah.
try to stay still.
Stick man over here.
But yeah, no, like that's a really important thing to look at too, because I think, and you guys probably as men can identify this with this too, that we go into relationships and we deem the relationship as being toxic, and we think that it's all the qualities of the other person or that we're the bad guy. We don't stop to look at, okay, you're your own person, I'm my own person. We come with our own baggage, we come with our own pain. We probably speak different love languages. Like there are so many levels to it. And I think we really, like Ashley and Willie, you guys were both saying, before we're ready to start a relationship, we need to go and clear out all the past shit so that we can go into a relationship fresh, blank canvas, and show up authentically as ourselves. Because if we have no self-awareness, we're just living from a space of defense.
Yeah.
So
No, go ahead. Just to add on is, you know, until we recognize our value and our worth, like Willie, you touched on, really, you know, having that confidence. I am missing a limb.
Gotta love virtual reality now.
You know, unless you take that time to really recognize, you know, that we attract that which we see ourselves to be, or that we're worthy of, and how we see the world. So unless we are actually taking that time to really look at, hey, you know, what was my relationship like? You know, if they didn't value me, is it because I'm not valuing myself? Because we teach people how to treat us. And so, you know, not only just letting go of everything you've been experiencing and stepping into a new relationship in a complete, open, brand new book, ready to create, you also have to recognize, am I in that space of even attracting somebody that's going to treat me well? Because if I don't value myself, I'm totally not going to attract that energy.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I want to invite you guys into the conversation here. A huge part of that and not having the value and coming from, past pains and everything else, which we all do as human beings, we have these defenses up that we use to try to protect ourselves. Lost Willie there. Yeah, we lost him. We'll just continue without him for a minute. So Eric, if you could just share, like, you were talking about how you were put up for adoption and you had some self-worth issues. What are some of the defenses that you came into relationships with? Whereas, like, something you're sharing with me the other night too, is like, sometimes when people are afraid, that's when they're the loudest. And sometimes when people are insecure, that's when they're really, stepping forward and trying to get the most attention. So what are some defenses that you personally had that you came into past relationships with that maybe created some or contributed to some toxic cycles?
And I'm going to touch on that, but just I wanted to say something Willie had talked about that I thought was very important, and it helped me to realize something, is that, in all of my relationships, it was the beginning of the relationship that was the most addicting part. That's where all the self-value and the worthiness came from, was just the whole excitement of getting that person to love me. But then once I figured out that they loved me, there was no more excitement. So that's how I got my self-worth and value out of it, was really getting them to love me. And then I stayed in the relationships, and I had multiple relationships, because if I thought that I wasn't good enough, if they left and they moved on, then that confirmed that. So it was important for me to keep them, and it was almost like I kept hostages. But to answer your question, for me, the biggest thing is I wasn't emotionally available. That was my defense. I had so many walls up that I would allow partners to get just close enough, but they wouldn't penetrate that bubble. They wouldn't really get into my heart space. And that was really my defense. I mean, I've always been a laid back, calm guy. So, I wasn't, and I've never liked to argue. I've never liked to fight. I've never liked any of that. That's just not me. But I wouldn't be vulnerable, and they couldn't get close to me, no matter how much they tried. There was no point of them even trying, because they weren't getting close to me. So I think that was my biggest defense.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, is that fear of vulnerability. I think even just as children growing up, we're taught, and this probably, I know it's heightened for men too, with you guys being told from the time you're a small child not to show certain emotions, not to express yourself certain ways, because it's not the manly thing to do. And then as you continue through that, through your life, girls kind of go through this phase where they're like, oh, I want the bad boy, I want that alpha, I want that, whatever that image is to them. So boys start to act like, I'm big macho man, I'm big this, because they think that's what people want. They think that's what women want, what society wants. And then they get lost in that. And especially in the ego side of it, where there is no room for vulnerability. There is no room for feelings. And how do you love if you can't be vulnerable, right?
Yeah. I really actually love that you rebrought that up.
Rebrought.
Sasha's got invisible powers. No, I love that you restated what Willie had mentioned around not I totally lost my thought there for a second. But no, I totally get that space of, not competing, not no, I'm totally off it. And that right there, I totally lost that thought. Yeah,
that's okay. Yeah. So Willie, we were just talking about like defenses that we bring into relationships. So sometimes when we're hurt in the past, we start to, and with everybody, we start to build these walls to protect ourselves. We put on these lenses. Like, for example, when my mom sent me away when I was 11 years old and stopped talking to me for months at a time, I put on this lens that I had no worth, I had no value. When my first boyfriend broke up with me because I was a virgin and I wasn't ready to have sex with him, and then started dating one of the most promiscuous girls in school, I put on this lens that I have to put out and men will only value me for sex, right? So then I start to act that way and I start to behave that way. That's not me. It's just a lens that I put on. Now I'm attracting men who are only valuing me for that. I'm not actually going to attract a man who's going to respect me in any way. So now I'm attracting predators, and I'm attracting men that are going to devalue me. And these are, you know, and then because of that, now I have this whole new set of rules that I have to live by, where I have to protect myself and, you know, uphold myself a certain way and be tough and be gangster or whatever the hell that looks like, right? So that was my defense. So I end up stepping into this reality where I thought I was like the most gangster baddie. Like I thought it was just so hard. Me behind that, I was scared, I was weak, I was vulnerable, but I was living in that space of ego and protection and defense for so long. And now you bring that into a relationship. For example, I met somebody who was actually a good guy, and I would go into a relationship and just cause destruction because I would almost like push certain qualities out of him because of my, you know, mindset and my behavior, which wasn't actually me. And, you know, he could see my heart, but then I would treat him a certain way because I saw men as being the same, right? So it's Willie, I guess that's kind of what I was going to. What are some of the past things that you've gone through? Can you see that you've built little walls to defend yourself? And if so, how did you show up in relationships because of that?
Yeah, I think with my dad getting on drugs at a young age, like, you know, that was my heart. That was like me and him, we was tight. So that hurt me to a point to where I was basically, I put this, like you said, the lens is I don't give a fuck. Like, you know what, if you don't give a fuck, I don't give a fuck. Excuse me, like I don't care, you know? But so then I tried to put that on and smile. I come from a small town, so, you know, everybody knows everything. So everybody knows talking about your home life, your dad on drugs, this, and this. But so I try to put on this front like I didn't care. A smile, joke all the time, play, don't pay attention, like wouldn't do schoolwork. Like I just didn't care about nothing. So I would hold all that in until so I could only hold it so more, then I would react with violence. So when I'd act out, get into it, and then, but that kind of tied into with, like you say, I applied that into my ego as, well, shit, this is who I am. You know what I mean? This is what I do. If you're gonna deal with me, you better respect me, and if you don't, then you gotta whoop me. You know, so, but I took that all the way through life, like relationships with everything. Like, look, basically, if it wasn't my way, all right, whatever, you ain't got to be here. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't want to be here, leave. You know, so but that wasn't true, because there's a lot of women, as soon as they leave, I'd be sitting over like, damn, come back. You know, I'm just playing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry. But, you know, but it took me a long time to even be able to be honest with myself, because I sat there and not want them to leave and be mad as hell that they left when I just talked to them crazy and told them to leave, all because I couldn't even admit to myself, like, hey, you do care. You know what I mean? Like, there's things that you do care about in this life. You can't just not care about nothing, you know? So
you touched on that too, is like you would bring them back, or you would, when you like they'd leave and you were like begging for them back, you know, obviously you kind of recognize something in that moment and realize, you know, maybe I messed up, you know, I fucked up, babe, could come back, right?
yeah.
Now you come back, you know, what was the difference between, you know, maybe where you are now and in those past times? Like, did you do anything different when they came back? And if not, what do you need to recognize in yourself to be able to switch that when they came back, it would actually be a different cycle?
And maybe allow yourself to open up differently, or whatever that looks like.
At that point, I didn't, even though I wanted them to come back, I never go after them. You know, because my pride was too big to admit that I felt that way. So, you know, later on when time go by, then we might, hey, you know, but we leave that alone and we just start over. But later on, when they come back, like a lot of guys will do, you know, we don't care until it's time to care. Meaning, like, we don't care, and then y'all leave, and now we realize, okay, yeah, we did mess up. So we're gonna do whatever it takes at the time to fix. We know the problem most of the time, you know. So we're gonna fix all the things that need to be fixed at that time to get you back in the house. And depending on us and who we are and what we're going through is how long of that time frame it's gonna be before you get back the real version of who you was dealing with. So
what is important in that? What do you think is important in that to recognize in order to not end up back in that same cycle and to break that? What do you think would be needed, whether it's male or female?
I think they need to be honest with themselves on what are you looking for out of life. You know, like, because a lot of us, we hold on to people that we're not even happy with, you know, but we're so scared to be alone that we feel like this version is better than being by ourselves. But really, if you would just step out of your comfort zone long enough to learn yourself, you realize that you're much happier on your own. I stayed in a marriage for 5 years and I was miserable, all because on paper, I'm talking about a great wife. You know what I mean? She did everything that a wife, like as a man, the thing that I've been told to look for in a wife, she had all that. So, but we didn't have that connection. We didn't have the personality. Like we couldn't sit here and just have a good conversation about life. So I needed that. Like she had everything but the one thing that I truly needed, and that was communication and a good personality. So I stayed. And one thing I realized, you can't fake happiness. It don't matter if the person got money. It don't matter if they got everything that you think you want in your life. If they're not giving you that one thing that really gets with your soul, you're not going to be happy, and you're prolonged. Some people never leave, but they're miserable. They grow old and they get miserable because you got to take action on your life. Find out what makes you happy and go for it. If that relationship ain't it, hey, chop it up and move to the next one, figure out what it is. For me, it took realizing that my happiness is my responsibility. And the only way to be happy is to analyze yourself and figure out who you are. So once I started doing the self-check, now I started realizing, hey, I do care. So let me quit acting like I don't care, because when they leave, I don't want you to leave. So and I realized that if you don't change your ways, even if the person comes back, like I've been in a relationship where I cheated and they came back, but it never got better. It only got worse. So if I'm causing the situation, if I don't learn to change the cause of it, then the effect's always going to be the same. Either you go into another woman or you bring it back a woman that the trust is crumpled up and it's never going to be right. So
I love that. And Eric, you look like you have something you wanted to contribute to this part of the conversation too. Anything that you wanted to touch on?
As Willie was talking, I was sitting and I was thinking that, the male ego is, woo. I remember I dated a young lady for a couple years, and I remember sitting on her couch and she was mad at me about something. And I didn't care, because in my delusional mind, she'd be stupid to leave me, right? But yet I'm laying on her couch, not paying child support, not working. She's working 2 jobs, but my mind really told me that she had the best thing in the world. She had the best possible scenario. So, and then one day it just all occurred to me just how delusional I was, and that's the way I was in a lot of relationships. But the other thing is that, and Sasha, you said this, it takes 2 to tango. See, because for the women that I was involved with, for them to stay in the situation, we both did something for each other. You know what I mean? I mean, we both met needs that the other person had, because I didn't pick, because water seeks its own level. So I wasn't picking women who were operating at their highest and best, because I wasn't operating at their highest and best. So I knew for my whole scheme to work, I couldn't pick these women. So I always ended up with women who were emotionally unavailable themselves, who didn't feel good about themselves. So even though I'm not saying that I didn't cause a lot of pain, but the relationships, we served each other to a certain degree, and we made each other a lot sicker. We added garbage to each other's side of the street.
Yeah. Just to speak on that, I believe that, because like when I was speaking on with my wife, right? She was miserable too. She was a Hispanic lady. But her culture was, hey, once you're married, you take whatever he gives out. You know what I mean? So she wanted to leave as well, but she would have never stepped to her family because of things that had been installed in her. And that's what finally made me leave, was realizing that I'm not doing her a favor. She's not gonna leave. I can cheat. I'm gonna do everything. She's gonna stay there. But she's miserable. Like I seen how she felt about herself decline. You know what I mean? Like she was getting stuff from it, because she was married, she had the family life, we was doing all right for ourselves. You know, she could say that she grew up and did this and this and that, but far as receiving the love that she was giving out, I wasn't giving it to her. You know what I mean? Like, as a father, I would want her to be like, hey, look, you're not happy neither. Make the decision to pull out. You ain't got to settle for what he's giving you, you know? But yeah, it do go both ways though. Two toxic people, hey, it's a lot of marriages just like that.
And it's not even necessarily like, I don't believe that there's a quote that says something around this too, but I don't believe that people are naturally just toxic. I think we have toxic behaviors, and we classify people as being toxic. And in a relationship, one person can look worse than the other, but we feed off each other, and we need to own responsibility for our role in how that relationship is unfolding. And in order to do that, we have to have a certain level of self-awareness. And until we start to actually look at ourselves and get to know ourselves, we're not going to understand our emotional triggers. We're not going to understand how our reactions and behaviors are, coming out and affecting the other person. We're just looking at selfishly how I'm being affected, what I'm feeling, what the other person's doing to me. And I know, like, coming from very abusive relationships, Ashley and I, like, when I first met Ashley, I met her, she had a black eye sitting beside a guy that just punched her out. And I knew that, even though she told me some bullshit story about how she fell down the stairs or a remote or something, I knew because I just came out of a really violent relationship myself. And it was so easy to look at that person and be like, okay, you've been in and out of jail for the last 8 years. You're a drug dealer. You do this and that and this and that. You're the bad guy. I don't deserve any of the ways you treat me. But it took me a long time to realize that I saw red flags from the beginning, and my value was so low that I still chose to stay in that relationship. The first time he put his hands on me, I justified it. Oh, he just got angry, and that increased throughout the few years that we were together. And I, as a woman, have to own responsibility for my role in that. Not to mention, when things would get heated, it's not like I was sitting there cowering on the ground. It started out me getting right back in his face. Well, you and blah, 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 hitting him back too. But because I'm the woman and I'm smaller and I do less damage, I'm the victim. And I'm not justifying abuse in any way. And I'm not saying that, anybody deserves that kind of treatment, but we do have to look at how we are contributing to those cycles, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, like you guys both just said, Eric and Willie, how we all get something from those relationships, whether it's a sense of security, it's familiarity, it's, sexual, it's financial, whatever. We're not going to stay in something if we're getting nothing from it. There's something
holding us there for sure. And I know that, all of us here know, and it's not an easy journey to actually take a mirror and look at ourselves. And, that's a big part of the reason why we continue to just stay in those relationships. We continue to just not do the work, because it's not going to be pretty. It's an ugly view of ourselves when we have to actually look at who we are and who we've been throughout and how we've contributed. And, I can say to, those who are listening to this, that as hard as it is and as ugly as things get, and as much as, I remember when I first started my journey, I intensely didn't stop for a year, like on a deep dive. And it got to a point where I was like so uncertain of myself, questioning who I am. And it got to a point where, like, it was overwhelming. And if you just keep on pushing through, as you release all of that, as you look at all that, you recognize that that's not even who you actually are. And that is the beauty in it, is that those are just ways that we become because of trying to survive, trying to find love, trying to, just really get validated on who we are, because it gets so distorted through our evolution of life. And if you just stick to the work, the other side is so much more rewarding. Easy. What is good in life is not easy. The best things in life are not easy to come by. It takes that deep work. It takes that commitment. It takes that discipline and that
sense of responsibility.
Yeah. And but ultimately on the other side of, that storm, that hurricane, that destructive emotion that comes up, is beauty. It's self-awareness. It is knowing how to love yourself on a deeper level and not needing validation. You know, trust me, it's not going to just come and you're all of a sudden going to love everything about yourself. No, it's a journey, but you find beauty in who you are, and you learn to not allow the thoughts and beliefs about ourselves to really take over. And, you know, you have better relationships, you know, better overall just experience of life, because you're truly getting to live authentically and you're recognizing who you're being and how it impacts everything and everyone around you.
And like you were just mentioning, and that you guys had all touched on too, until we can learn to love ourselves and know ourselves and understand what our needs are, what our desires are, what our triggers are, we cannot actually fully connect with and love somebody, because we're constantly trying to fill a void. And love is not a void to be filled. Love is like a buildup of, you know, just worth and value in ourselves that we overflow and spill onto the people around us. And if we don't have that to give, we're being selfish trying to get into a relationship, because we're just going to constantly deplete each other.
Well, love is the true essence of all of us.
Absolutely. So for you guys, I'm sorry to throw you on the spot, and if you need a second to just think on it, what advice, if you guys could each leave one piece of really valuable advice for anybody who is trapped or stuck in a toxic or abusive relationship right now, what you can speak to the man, to the woman, whatever that looks like, what piece of advice would you leave with anybody listening?
Well, I guess I would have to say, if I was speaking to a woman, I would say, don't wait on help. You know, figure out a plan and execute it. You know what I mean? Because men, a lot of times, if we're that type of man that we abusive and stuff like that, you know, I'm speaking from outside looking in. That's never been my thing, but I've seen guys. But a lot of them, it gets worse and worse. You know, the first time they didn't mean to, the second time, but it kind of like a bully. It's getting worse and it's going to get worse. So look, there's never going to be a right time. It's just like starting a business, like doing anything. You got to jump out on faith and, you know, come up with a plan and make it happen. And with men, for a man, I would say, look, hey, it's nothing wrong with saying this woman's, hey, she's abusive. Like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe. Because a lot of times I think men feel like we're the man, we're supposed to be tough and all this, but hey, it's all right to say, look, I'm scared of this crazy lady. You know what I mean? Like, let me out the house. Like, you know, but for real, like, you don't have to be there. You don't have to take abuse. Like, you can be a victim too. I know some women that are crazy and can whoop you if you're not careful. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, like, you ain't got to stay neither. You got the right, everybody has the right to be happy. And if the person's not giving you something that you're enjoying your life, you have the right every day to reevaluate your life. And if you're not happy no more, you got the right that day to make a decision to change it. And you can. It's not easy, but it's doable.
I love that. You have the power to reevaluate your life every day.
Just before you go into whatever you're going to say, I just want to highlight one thing. It's funny that stuck out to you too, because something that really stuck out to me over the last few months was this analogy of, if you were to look at all areas in your life, whether it's your relationships, your finances, your career, whatever, as the person that you are here and now, if that circumstance were to just come into your life now, if that person or that relationship were to just come into your life now, would it be something that you would want and that you would give your energy to? And if the answer is no, get the fuck out. Because oftentimes we just get comfortable, we just get stuck, and we stay way too long in things that just don't serve us. Maybe at one time they did serve us, but we grow, we're constantly evolving, we're constantly learning and growing. And sometimes, unfortunately, we just get to a space where we outgrow certain things, whether it's people, circumstances, whatever. So really look at the relationships in your life and ask yourself, is this person serving me? Are they draining me or contributing to my love and my well-being? And it's a clear answer from there, whatever, you know, steps you need to take next.
And if it's just they're serving you in financials or like certain basic level needs, so you can find that in a partner and still have everything you want around a healthy, beautiful relationship.
Absolutely. So Eric, what you got for us?
You know, toxic relationships are very blinding. I think when you're in a toxic relationship, or it's very hard to realize that you're in a toxic relationship a lot of times because you're both serving each other's needs. So I think that we all come to a point in our lives where we have to ask ourselves, is this as good as it gets?
Yes.
Is this really what I expect out of my life? Is this what my life was supposed to look like? And we have to do some honest soul searching, because until we get to that point, all these other distractions are amazing sometimes, even though they're painful. You know, I mean, we can be in a relationship and get our ass kicked, but if we're still getting something out of it that we value more than getting our ass kicked, we're not going to get out. You know, if security is my biggest thing in some, you know, in a relationship, and this person's providing that for me, all the other stuff, it doesn't matter, because that's all I see right then.
That's right.
So I really think that what we have to do is we have to get to a point in our lives. So if you're at that point where you realize that your dream of life, what you thought life was going to be, was way bigger than what it is right now, then you have to make some choices. Einstein said it, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting different results. So when you get to that point, you have to ask yourself, what am I willing to do to change things? But until you get to that point, I think sometimes you're going to be stuck. But if you're at that point, you have to ask yourself, what am I willing to do to reach those dreams or those goals, or to create that life that I really want?
Yeah, well said.
Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to know, you know, how could you separate, you know, it not being your best? Like, is this really the best thing that life can give me when it comes to, you know, choosing your partner in life, and knowing when it's just your expectation is way too high, or your belief systems, or like whether it's like a commitment issue, or how do you recognize whether it's something within you, or if this relationship actually may not just be what I really want?
That's a good question. Anybody want to speak on that?
Anyone? I'm searching.
I think it comes down to what this whole conversation's been. It's about doing that soul searching and recognizing, first of all, like Mother Teresa always says, and I'm pretty sure it probably says it in the Bible too, we have to treat other people the way we want to be treated. So if we have an expectation of how we want to be treated, we need to ask ourselves, is it realistic for me to treat somebody that way? And if the answer is no, then maybe it's not a realistic standard. But I also think that we need to think big in terms of what we want our life to look like and what we want our relationships to look like. And if something doesn't feel good, and if it feels like you're settling, then you probably are. And I think sometimes we undervalue ourselves and we settle for what we think we can get, rather than creating an image and a dream and a desire of what we want a relationship to actually look like.
I think you can be in a relationship with somebody and be happy and still think that there's more. Mm-hmm. So I think the reality of it is that you have to ask yourself, does this relationship make me happy?
I love that.
You know, yeah. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to.
Because it's like kind of like we could fix everything we want about ourselves, but if we can be whole and complete with ourselves, it doesn't matter about all those things we want to fine tune.
Yeah, I think for me, and that's something I'm kind of going through still, like trying to learn, because like getting out of my marriage and coming into my new situation, like it wasn't supposed to happen that way. I really needed time to learn me, like everything that we're saying, and ended up getting her pregnant. So, you know, I want to be in the house with my daughter. So I'm trying to do that. And I have times where I'm like, man, is this, even though like we get along perfect, like we got great personality, everything's there. But there's times I'm like, my vision for my life is so left field that I'm trying to show by example that I want her to pick onto this lifestyle. Cause like once you realize this, once you have this awareness or this awakening, like it's hard to be around people that don't understand that you can control your outcome. It's hard. So my thing now is trying to show like, hey, look, even though you're great and you're amazing, I love you, but this is what I'm on. And I want you to be here with me, but it's gotta be, you gotta want it as well. So for me, trying to analyze, like, okay, is she interested in it? Is she not? Or how long do I wait? How long do I last to see if they're gonna pick up, or you know what I mean? Like, so for me, I think it's figuring out what you truly want on everything. Like, what do you want out of life? And once you figure out what you want, no matter what it is, as long as it's not harmful or toxic, if it's not helping you get there, then you got one question. Is it good enough that I want to take them with me?
Yeah.
And if if it's not, then you got to make decisions.
Yeah, and I don't know how long you've been in that space of, you're in this evolution of yourself, and you're trying to show your partner this, because I totally get that. It's like you just want to share this with everybody.
Come on.
Yeah, right. You just get this like, oh, come on, like you can do it. Like, come do this with me. Like, it's going to be so much better.
Yeah.
One little thing I will just add, and I hope this, resonates with you. And if it doesn't, just leave it. But continue just evolving yourself, because the moment I let go of trying to show them and get them to jump on the bandwagon, the moment I released and surrendered to just doing what I needed to do, and not even sharing the growth, but just allowing them to observe, had their vibrations start to change, and they started to evolve. So, it seems like you're committed to this woman, you love her, and that things could work.
Lead by example.
Yeah. Try to change her or tell her that she's got to do this, and it'll probably happen a lot easier and more smooth.
Yeah. That's good advice. That's good advice.
And we could go deeper into that too, but basically, even on an energetic level, you raising your vibration, she's going to naturally feed off that. And her vibration, if you guys spend enough time together, she'll probably feed off that too. It can go both ways though, right? Because if somebody's energy is really, really down, it can drain you. And if you're, as an analogy, you're standing on a picnic table and somebody's standing on the ground, is it easier for you to pull them up, or is it easier for them to pull you down? So we have to really place of awareness of how different people's energies are affecting us too, and knowing that sometimes we think we're being selfish by putting our needs first, but ultimately we have to live with ourselves. If we're miserable, that's it. We get one shot at this.
Yeah.
All right.
Really beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and not only just being a part of it, but being a part of our first official launch of the session.
Hey,
What's up, man?
Looking down the world records.
We're making history. Right. You guys are amazing. And I also, just to add to that, I want to say thank you for being so vulnerable, because you guys are setting an example and showing men that it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's powerful to be vulnerable. And you're not supposed to go through life being a fucking cyborg, living in your and until we can start to build those walls down. And it's not just for men. I'm a very prideful person myself, and I've lived a long time with my ego, so I get it. But until we can start to remove those layers and stand in our true essence, we're never going to find fulfillment. So thanks again. I hope you guys have an amazing night. And I hope everybody watching that you guys got something really valuable from this conversation. Peace and love. Woo, woo.
thanks for having me.
Yes, most definitely.